This is the Humans of Gaming podcast, an open and honest conversation about games, life, and belief.
Hello and welcome to Humans of Gaming. I'm your host, Drew Dixon. I am the Chief Content Nerd at Love Thy Nerd, and I'm joined with Chris Gwaltney, our co-host.
Hey, I'm in Ohio, living it up in the Midwest, back in my old stomping grounds.
And what are you doing in Ohio?
Visiting some friends, hanging out, enjoying some cold weather and gloomy skies, which never happens in Southern California.
So is that like you actually enjoy it because you don't
I do. Yeah, I miss it. I mean, I miss it in the way of like, oh, it's cool to go visit it and then leave. You know, like I don't think if I were to live here again that I would enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
it's kind of depressing.
The whole grass is greener on the other side.
Yeah. We actually get more rain in Nashville where I live than Seattle. Like Seattle has this reputation of being like super rainy and stuff. But we get more rain, yeah. I think Seattle gets a lot of like drizzly storms and stuff like that. So it doesn't actually, but anyway, there will definitely be weeks where the sun hardly comes out at times here. And it's depressing.
We kind of rejoice when that happens in Ventura where we live. Yeah. Like it rained the other day. We had like an actual storm, like a thunderstorm, which never happens. Like literally the first time I think this whole year that we've had like a thunderstorm. Yeah. Like maybe we've had some like little sprinkling and stuff, but
we have a very special guest who can tell us about the weather in his part of the country, and that's Jamey Stegmaier. Hey, Jamey, how are you?
Hey guys, I'm here in St. Louis. Thank you for having me.
Is it rainy there right now?
Yeah, it's kind of overcast, a little cold, a little drizzly.
Do you get a lot of rain in St. Louis? I don't know much about St. Louis.
I would say, actually, no, I can't necessarily compare to Nashville. We get a decent amount. But it's definitely not like Seattle. It's not constant. It gets very hot and humid in the summer and icy in the winter.
Do you like living in St. Louis? I visited there and I thought it was a fun city.
Yeah. I grew up in a suburb of Virginia, and then I moved out here to go to college at Washington University here, and it just felt right, and so I stuck around. So I've been here over half my life now.
I remember when we went, the thing, I don't know why this sticks out to me, but we went to this ice cream place that was awesome called Clementine's Naughty and Nice Creamery. Have you ever been there?
Oh yeah, it's right near me. Yeah, they make really, really good ice cream. And did you try their naughty ice cream or did you stick with the nice? The naughty has a little bit of alcohol in it.
Yeah, I did. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say that, but I did. No, I'm kidding. I'll be fine. I did. Yeah, and it was good. It was great.
I don't know. I'm too old for them to actually card me. I don't know if it's like an amount of alcohol that they actually limit. Like if you're not 21, you can't have it. I can't remember.
It's funny. Like I think they do. I remember getting them asking for my idea to try it, but they told me like it would be impossible to get drunk off of this because you would have so much lactose prior to like
you'd be on the toilet faster than you would be able to get drunk.
Right. But then it's funny, I was in we were just talking earlier about how I took this vacation out west to like the American Southwest, like Arizona and Utah and Nevada, and on our flight I was reading the Southwest In-Flight magazine, and they had a profile of St. Louis, and they mentioned that ice cream place, and they were talking about how the owner has like figured out this new formula to make her ice cream more boozy. so like she figured out how to make some of them like up to like I want to say like 17 or 20% ABV, alcohol by volume. So that would be fairly potent ice cream, I would think. So go check that out.
They're in competition here for, I would say, best ice cream with Jenny's Ice Cream, which is not a St. Louis place, but they're in Columbus where you are, Chris.
They are. That's crazy. I just saw one the other day.
Yeah.
You got to go to Jenny's. We have those in Nashville.
Oh, so they're like a chain, huh?
Yeah, I think what's a franchise now? I think it's just in this kind of this side of the world. So Jamey, you are on the podcast because you've made lots of games. I guess you started along with Alan Stone, started Stonemaier Games, and you guys have made Euphoria and Viticulture, and one of my favorites, Scythe, and Charterstone recently. Well, you tell us, what else would people know you from?
Yeah, you've named, I think those are, and Charterstone. Those 4 are my designs. And then we've also published My Little Scythe, most recently Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig, and Between Two Cities, of course.
I was about to say that, and then I was like, well, I don't want to correct you. It's your company. I'm probably wrong. Maybe it is Between Two Castles, and I just thought it was Between Two Cities. How long have you been making games?
I started designing games when I was pretty young, like 6 or 7 years old, just for fun. Professionally, it started with Viticulture in 2011. It ended up being published through Kickstarter in 2012 and came out in 2013.
And I'm curious how, because you obviously been making games for a while, and I guess back then probably it was just like you were into games and it was fun to do, or okay. And what made you get the idea, like, oh, maybe I could actually like sell these and make something, maybe even make something of a living out of it?
Well, early on, I had no idea that I could make a career out of it. I definitely, that was unforeseen, but I was fascinated by the concept of Kickstarter unrelated to board games. And then board games started to appear on Kickstarter, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, this is a way that, this is a product that you actually need to produce like a minimum print run of. There's a sunk cost to it. And I started to see these projects do it. So I was like, okay, I'll give that a try and see where it goes.
Yeah. And I think, if I remember correctly, like Viticulture was one of the first kind of, fairly substantial Kickstarter success stories for board games. Is that right?
At the time, yeah, there were definitely a few bigger hits at the time, but among board games back in like 2012, 2011, yeah, it raised $65,000, which at the time was a lot for a board game project.
Which I think, probably inspired, if I remember correctly, inspired a lot of people. Now, there's a new board game on Kickstarter like every week.
Every hour.
Yeah.
Like I remember I just checked out Tidal Blades, Heroes of the Reef, their Kickstarter. Yeah. And that thing's going off. Was funded within the first hour and is now at $400,000 or something. So board games have come a long way since that, but you helped kind of start that trend, I think, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. I was inspired by guys like Ryan Lockett and Tasty Minstrel Games, but I think I was one of the first to really write about it in maybe a non-preachy way. Like I was very open about mistakes that I had made, and I was writing about it so people could avoid those same mistakes.
Yeah, and I'm curious, how did you manage to be successful with Viticulture, given that you hadn't published a game prior to that? I would think back then you were something of an unknown quantity. How did you get the word out and actually get that project funded?
I think there are probably 2 things that resulted in successful funding. And if I launched that same project the way it looks and the way it's structured today, it probably would not fund at all. But it was a bit stood out back then a little bit, and partially because of the timing, because there's still a few other projects.
Sure.
But the 2 main reasons are, one, I spent the first 2 days of the project sending individual personalized emails to everyone I knew, asking them to essentially trying to get them to go to the project page. I wasn't saying, you owe me anything, you should do this. I was just, I would find a reason that they might have a good time or make them smile by looking at the project page. And it wasn't a mass email. It was individual emails. It was hundreds of emails to friends and family. So
you were pouring time and effort into this, significant amounts of time and effort, I imagine.
Right. And early on in the project, like you said, I was completely unknown. Really, no one knew at all who I was, except for my friends and family. And for people who were organically discovering the project, it made a huge difference for them to see that the project was moving towards funding in those early days through these friends and family. And the other reason was for all those backers that were coming in and friends and family who backed it, within around 10, 15 minutes of anyone backing the project, I sent them a personalized thank you note by email over Kickstarter. And for a lot of people, I think that was the first time they'd ever gotten that type of a response from a creator. It's something that's very difficult to do now, but these projects that have, thousands and thousands of backers, it's not possible to do. But when you're getting 10 backers a day, it's definitely possible. And that, I think that made a big difference and helped me connect with some people in the board game media who were like, oh, okay, I've never had someone reply to me before. Let's talk more about this. Let's have a chat on Geek Dad or a place like that.
Yeah. And that seems to be something that like still is part of your, what's the word? Like ethos or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like when I talk about Scythe or Charterstone, kind of those are the two games that I think you've most recently put out expansions to or released. People always talk about how I was on the Facebook group for Charterstone. I had a question and I asked the question, and all of a sudden the creator of the game is answering my question and giving me a pointer here. So like you seem to have always maintained a pretty like open relationship and like made yourself available to your community even after your games have kind of experienced tremendous success. So I'm curious, like, is that something that's you've like just always wanted to be close to the community? Is that just who you are? Like, where does that come from?
That was actually the original reason I was fascinated by Kickstarter, that I could put a face and a name to people who shared my excitement for something.
Yeah.
And so that has definitely carried over throughout everything that I do to run the business. It's been tougher to scale that, but I'm on social media quite a bit every day trying to connect with people and help them have the best experience that they can with our games.
Well, we have another special guest with us, and Chris is going to introduce him before we jump in deeper into the podcast here.
Well, here's the thing. Before I introduce Jared, can we talk about Fenris yet, Drew? Like, have you started this?
I still haven't started it.
You are killing me. Like, we literally have Jamey right here.
I know. I feel terrible.
We finished it. So Jared and I, like, we're in a group together. We play games pretty much every week. And we finished Fenris a few weeks ago. I lost.
Yeah. I have two excuses. I have two excuses as to why I haven't started it yet. One is that I was just out of town for a week, basically. And then the other is that I feel like my group that I'm trying to get to play Rise of Fenris is totally different than yours. Like, your group is all gamer people who are like into board games and play regularly. Like, I just started a gaming group for the purpose of playing Rise of Fenris. So I'm trying to like train them. We've probably played like 5 or 6 games, but not everybody of Scythe, of just the base game. But not everybody's been able to make it to all 6 of those. And so anyway, it's been a scheduling thing, but also like I'm wanting to make sure they're committed before we start the campaign, which now I think I know they are. And it's been like, this is a credit to you, Jamey, in a lot of ways, but it's been like a huge source of, what's the word? Personal, like emotional health for me. Just to have a regular game group, that plays together has been like just increased my like happiness, my personal like happiness on a weekly basis by a significant margin. That's so great.
Anyway, I'll introduce you. Jared's, like I said, we play games together every week pretty much. And he's also one of LTN's monthly supporters. He helps us do things like this podcast and the articles on our website and going to conventions and our outreach events. And him and I actually a couple weeks ago ran a gaming area at a local convention here, a steampunk fest, which we thought Scythe was pretty appropriate for. Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, we were off in this random corner where no one knew that we were there. And they put us like this room that they had us set up like board games in. It was like a murder room. Like, I took a picture of the entrance to this place. You had to go down this set of stairs that was like all just murdery. So needless to say, we didn't have a whole lot of people come over and play games, but we had a good time nonetheless, I think. So anyway, here's Jared, and I think he's got a question maybe, or just wants to say hi. Or
yeah. So thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. Jamey, definitely, I'm a big fan of your games, like Chris mentioned. We've played a few of the recent campaigns. We played Charterstone before we played Fenris, and Chris actually did win that one. So both of those experiences were really fun, and I really appreciated basically all of your games. When we talked before, I think the main thing I was really interested in hearing more from you about, Drew mentioned a little bit earlier the aspect of how involved you are in the community via the Facebook groups and things like that. And that kind of led me to check out some of your videos that you post online regularly. So I guess my question is, it sounds like from your previous answer when you were talking about the Facebook group, that that's something you intentionally put a lot of effort and focus into. And I guess I just was curious to know if kind of what inspired you to do that.
And thank you for all that. I really appreciate what you said about Charterstone and Scythe, and I'm glad that you enjoyed the YouTube channel. I would say, yeah, a lot of it. Well, the YouTube channel started with me wanting a place to talk about game design, but I didn't want to be a reviewer because I didn't really want to say, I don't know, it just didn't feel right. As someone who's like in the industry, I didn't want to say those types of things publicly about the games that my peers spend so much time and energy making.
Yeah.
As a gamer, I certainly do have opinions about games. I have games I like or dislike, and so I've kind of figured out this way of talking about games in a way that I can just focus on the thing that I really like about it. And by putting it on video, I can hopefully have some good conversations with other people about that game or about other games that use similar mechanisms. And it's helpful for me as a designer to kind of look at games from that angle. Like what's the most fun thing in this game and what can I learn from it? And maybe I can apply it to a game that I make someday, whether it's that feeling that I get from it or something similar to that actual mechanism. And kind of, I think one thing that you've alluded to, one of the nice side effects of this is that, I don't know, I can't speak for other people, but for me, I am drawn to other designers and publishers who have a genuine love for games in general. And oftentimes I get that impression from other designers and publishers if they are talking about games other than just their own all the time. I totally respect that designers and publishers are excited about their own games and want to talk about them. But it's just neat to see like games like or guys like James Hudson, who clearly loves games and wants to talk about games a lot.
Clearly, I love him.
And there are many designers. Well, John Gilmore is a designer that I've heard speak very lovingly about other games and all the games that he loves to play. And that just makes me want to dive into their games even more than I already have.
I think it's really in an age where I think everybody's trying to sell us something all the time. Mm-hmm. I think it's very refreshing to be reminded. I don't want to overstate it, but like it humanizes you to us, the consumers. Mm-hmm. You know, when you feel the freedom or just your natural tendency to just be a person and geek out about this thing that we can all kind of share in. Honestly, like at least for me, that sells more copies than constantly blathering on about your own product. You know, like I'm going to be way more endeared to someone when, you know, it builds that trust and rapport. And I think that's really cool. And I don't think the board game industry is just full of like peddlers and people that are trying to, you know, sell their thing or whatever. But there are those specific people, you know, you mentioned James or yourself like that. I think just seem more down to earth and like, hey, we could sit around and play a game together. Mm-hmm. And that's super cool.
Yeah. And it seems like, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but it seems like to me that the board game industry is somewhat unique in that regard. Like it doesn't feel like, you know, we cover a lot of video games on our site and we have a lot of video game designers on this podcast. Like Jamey, you're probably one of the few people like designers that's making a living doing this. For like a lot of people, even people who make pretty successful games, it's not really a business. It's just kind of like their hobby that they hope maybe makes some money at some point because, hey, that'd be nice. And maybe they could then quit their day job or whatever. But it feels like an industry full of hobbyists / people who are just really passionate about it. Which I think is kind of rare in our like kind of, I don't know, like hyper capitalistic world, which is, it sort of makes it like a refreshing industry to be a part of, I guess. Do you feel that way about it?
I do. And I think sometimes people don't realize how true that is, that there are many designers and publishers, this isn't their full-time job. And if it is their full-time job, they don't have like a huge team of people. There are very few companies that employ over 5 employees, definitely very few that employ over a dozen. I've heard people talk about Queen Games in this way sometimes, like as if Queen Games is this giant company, but I think they have like 4 or 5 people that work there.
Yeah.
So even on like for these companies that look big or maybe even act big, they're usually very small. And for many of the people that work there, they're volunteers or they're getting compensated in games, not money.
Thanks so much, Jared, for coming on. We really appreciate it. I appreciate your support. And we do like to ask kind of more personal questions on this podcast to get to know our guests a little bit better, where they come from, that kind of thing. So, Jamey, you mentioned before that you grew up in Virginia and that now you live in St. Louis. We've talked before, so we're going to pretend like we haven't. But for the sake of our listeners, was religion a part of your upbringing? What was your upbringing like?
I grew up in a Catholic family. We went to church every week. I feel like my parents tried to raise me with Christian values, that was my aunt's a nun. We have religious people who in my family who work for the church, and I actually ended up working for the Catholic Church as well as my second job after college.
Was so I know you mentioned earlier like making games. I think you said you started when you were like 6.
Yeah.
But like, what kind of board games were you playing? Like, did your family play with you? Were you playing with friends? Do you have siblings, or what was like the game situation like growing up?
I do have siblings. I have a younger brother, younger sister, and I have some friends that I definitely played games with. I think it was a combination of friends and family. I have good memories of playing Monopoly and Millborn.
Good memories of playing Monopoly.
Yeah, we actually had we didn't know any better.
Yeah.
We enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Labyrinth, Scotland Yard, Risk. We would play. I wouldn't play Risk with my family, but as a family, we definitely played Millborn and some other card games. We were the type of family that we did a lot together. We were talking about earlier. We're talking about a trip to Bryce Canyon. We took a family trip out there. We would go camping a lot. We would play these games together. We would eat dinner together, not in front of the TV. We would just sit around the table and talk. So, looking back, I'm kind of grateful that my parents did this. I didn't fully realize how nice it was at the time to have that style of upbringing.
Yeah, it's funny how you don't realize as a kid how special those things are. But now that I have kids, and we were just talking earlier about how I made this trip out to Bryce Canyon and to Zion, and went out to that part of the country, out in Utah. And I got back and I just felt like so energized to go out and like be in nature and those kind of things, and I brought back all these memories of my dad taking me backpacking when I was a kid. You think, well, this is just kind of what dads do or whatever at the time. But in reality, like, so few people have that kind of like upbringing where their parents really invest kind of personal, intentional time with their kids. And it just made me like kind of want to like do that stuff with my kids, and get out and see the world and those kind of things. And board games are a huge opportunity to do that.
I feel like I had this moment when I was probably like 19 or 20, and I don't know why, but something happened, or I was just thinking about it, and I had this like aha moment of just being super grateful to my parents. And I just remember like calling them up and just thanking them, like, hey, I'm sorry that I was such a turd like the whole time that I lived with you and I wasn't very appreciative, but like looking back and, just pinpointing some of these specific things that I know is very intentional on your guys' part. And I'm just really appreciative of it. I don't know. Did you guys have like an aha moment like that, or were you better than me and just thought about it when you were in it?
Yeah, I was definitely a turd too. But I think I had a couple of aha moments in my 20s and some in my 30s too. There's certain things ingrained in me that I I didn't. It has taken some reflection and some aha moments to realize, like even like the camping thing. I my dad would teach me things just by the way that he interacted with nature. Like if he wanted to make a walking stick and we were out camping, he wouldn't cut it off a living tree. He would find a fallen stick and he would carve a walking stick out of it. And he was kind of showing me, I didn't realize at the time, but he was kind of showing me like, you need to respect nature, or this is the way that I do it. Maybe you can do this too. And looking back in my 20s, like that's just ingrained in me now. Like it's not even a conscious thing that of course I don't break a branch off a tree. If I want a walking stick, I find one that's
right
falling down, and that, goes to many other elements of nature too. But things like that, that I definitely did not realize at the time that they were imparting upon me.
Frankly, it scares me to death about having children.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if I'm intentional enough or if I'm thoughtful enough to like think through those kinds of things. Hey, something's going on with Jared's, like his mic is muting and unmuting repeatedly. Do you guys hear that?
I see it.
And I see it visually. Yeah. Are you able to do anything with that, Drew?
Yeah, I noticed it too. I tried to fix it, but whenever I mute it, it just keeps doing
Jared,
the
if you
same
can
thing
hear
over
us,
and
maybe
over.
drop out and come back in. I don't know if he can hear us. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I don't know.
All
It
right.
kind of scares the crap out of me about having kids, because I'm just not sure that I'm that thoughtful about, and I'm sure like Drew, you can attest to this, being that you're the only one here that has kids. But like, I'm sure there's plenty of times where you feel inept, or like you didn't do that thing right, or you didn't do that thing intentional enough. But
more often than not, I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. But that's for sure. But and I don't know that I had an aha moment where I like called my parents and confessed all my sins and
maybe
thanked them for being good parents.
Maybe this is the aha moment right now.
Yeah, I mean, I did have this moment where I was like, just really thankful for my both my mom and my dad, but particularly my dad for just investing that time and getting me out in the outdoors, because like I could just feel it coming back immediately. Like I want to make more time to get out in the world and see our nation's national parks and that kind of thing. I think I've always been somewhat thankful to my parents, but I did have this thought of like, I should call them, and I haven't done that. And I need to like, verbalize it and be like,
we could just, you could just like awkwardly pour your heart out right now while we're recording, and then just tell them like, oh guys, did you listen to the latest Humans of Gaming podcast? You might really enjoy it.
Yeah.
No, maybe not.
Yeah, I should do that totally. But yeah, so you grew up Catholic, Jamey, and have you always? I assume you practiced it. You weren't just going through the motions, like you believed in God and that kind of thing. Like growing up, was it always something you just kind of believed in, or did you come to a moment where it were like, oh, this is for me, or what was that process like?
I don't even know if we discussed that one before. I definitely did not question it for a long time. And then I was told to question it, I think going through maybe the first communion process, maybe confirmation. There are a couple of different levels in the Catholic Church. And I think both.
You were told to question it.
Yeah, I think maybe it was my parents, maybe it was the church. I mean, they weren't saying, Jamey, you should question it, but they were saying, this is a good time for you to actually make a choice about this. And
I think that's super cool, though, because I think that's pretty uncommon. I mean, maybe not uncommon in Catholicism, but certainly uncommon in like Protestant, Christian, evangelical stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, whoever said it, I wish I could remember now. I appreciated that, because it was a nice moment for me to step back and say that I choose this faith. This isn't just the thing that I was born into.
Yeah.
And so, I did make that choice, and I made that choice again. We had a great Catholic church at the Washington University campus. It's a private university, so they have every denomination of every church and faith there. So I kind of got lucky there. Did you guys have good church experiences in college?
Yeah, I did in college, I think. In like growing up, I remember just never caring. Like my family went to church, and I just did not want to be there. And so I wouldn't, like, I would put my head on the pew in front and just try to like fall asleep. I just found it incredibly boring. And I don't know if it was actually boring or if I just it was like so self-centered or whatever that I didn't want to be there, that I just refused to pay attention, but that was my experience growing up. But then in college was like the first time I started listening for myself and like sort of exploring. And I don't know that I went to churches. I didn't really go to churches that encouraged you to like question the faith or like make sure that you believe it necessarily. But I did go to churches that encouraged me to read. And so like I developed a love for like studying theology, which began the process of me really like looking inward and going like, do I really believe this stuff? Is it really like based in, like, is there historical accounts of like, of this stuff? Sorry, I almost dropped my mic. Almost knocked it off the table, but yeah, like, is this stuff based in reality? Is there philosophical grounding for all these kinds of things? So
I didn't grow up in the church. Like my grandma and grandpa and like some of my aunts and uncles are Catholic. So that was a little bit of my experience, but really it was pretty boring from what I knew of it. Like it was never explained to me. It was just like, oh, I was staying the night with my cousins. You go to church with us on Sunday. And it was like, hey, stand up at this time, sit down at this time, say this thing back when they say this. And that was, I didn't really have an understanding of it.
Yeah. I remember going to Catholic churches with some friends, like in middle school or high school, and being totally confused by like all that stuff. Like when you're supposed to sit down and stand up, and like whether I was allowed to have communion.
There's a lot of ritual
kind of things.
to it.
Yeah. Which, if you know the tradition of that, can be really beautiful and meaningful. Yeah. But I think for me, I mean, that was not a tradition that was passed down to me or anything. So I was just kind of like flying blind. And then I kind of got involved in like a youth group at a Protestant church around like middle school, high school age. And then I kind of was a part of that. And then actually in college, which I didn't really go to college, I was there for like a year and flunked out. But that's kind of when I had my sort of faith crisis where I was like, I don't believe any of this crap. This is crazy. What am I doing? And then I got involved with kind of a weird church. Not weird. That sounds like cultish, but a church in my town that they had bought this abandoned elementary school and used that to like meet on Sundays. And then there was actually a group of guys that lived in the school and did so because it was kind of in a bad neighborhood in our town. And so these guys lived there to sort of be like an intentional presence in the community to like serve people and serve the poor and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of just got involved with them through like a mutual friend, and I ended up living there and just meeting those guys and seeing like actual faith in action instead of just, oh, this is a Sunday thing that we do. It was like, no, we're actual Jesus people that are trying to live this every single day. That was really eye-opening for me. So yeah, I think that was a pretty good experience.
I didn't know that about you. That's interesting. So Jamey, you went to a Catholic college, is that right?
No, I went to a private college where they had a pretty big Catholic church associated with the campus. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And you said you worked for the Catholic Church for a while. Is that right?
Yeah. During college, that was my work-study job, was working at the Catholic Student Center. And then
And what did you do there?
Oh, work-study is just like I was managing calendars and data entry, and like it was an administrative assistant type thing, a few hours a week.
So you weren't like taking people's confessions or anything?
No. It wasn't.
Frucked.
You have to be frucked to do that, right?
It's a family-friendly podcast.
Is that the right word? I probably misused that.
And then
it just came to me in a moment with it.
I had a different job. Like after college, I got a job at a publishing company that was unrelated to the church at all. And then when that job ended, I was looking for a job, and I mentioned it to the priest. I continued going to that same church, and I ended up getting a job as the director of operations there. So again, not a religious position, but more administrative.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask what that meant. Organizing events and calendar, and what does director of operations look like?
I'm sure it depends on the job. This particular one meant that I was managing the staff, and I was there was a big fundraising event that I ran, so I was doing some marketing, fundraising, some development, and I was managing the facility itself because they had a big church right off. I guess it's on the school campus, but right on the edge of it.
So that's interesting.
Cool.
The fundraising thing. So like doing marketing and stuff for that, do you feel like some of that experience helped you like transition over with like the Kickstarter stuff we were talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've kind of, all the jobs that I've had kind of have taught me very specific things that just happened to lead up into me being a fairly effective Kickstarter creator.
It was interesting
I think
when you were talking about that first Kickstarter you did and some of the steps that you took, like, you know, the personalized messages and like, cause you know, we're a nonprofit and like I've worked in nonprofit world my entire adult life. And some of those, like I could hear some of those kind of fundraising principles. Cause that's such a huge, like, even with what we're trying to do with LTN is like making sure that it's a very personalized process. And it's not just like, you know, we try to use the word like partner or, you know, cause we want people to know like you're in this with us. This isn't just, oh, the product that Chris and Drew are making or whatever. Like this is all of us kind of doing this thing together. So I'm connecting the dots. I'm just doing it out loud.
Totally. No. Yeah. I that all those things were instilled in me, both actually working at the church and working as a waiter at restaurants in college or during the summers in college. I learned so much about customer service by doing that.
You have to, or you don't get paid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Well, what about now? Like, so you said you grew up Catholic and you went, you even worked in the church for a while. Where are you at now in terms of your like spiritual life? You still believe? You still practice? What does it look like?
I'm at a point in my life right now where I am not actively practicing, but I would say more than ever before in my life, I'm trying to live through my business largely, live the principles and the beliefs that I grew up with through the Catholic Church. Basically, trying to treat people really well, treat them as I would want to be treated, and act in love when I deal with the many customers that we have around the world. Act in loving ways to them, even in moments where it's tough to do so.
Yeah, those never come up with Kickstarters or gamers.
Yeah, so more than ever before, I think I'm very acutely aware of those things, and I definitely struggle with it. Even though I say I try to, I struggle with it all the time. But I think it's a good struggle to have, to be aware of.
Yeah. What started you down that path of going like, hey, I really want, like, because you said recently, or maybe more than ever before, I think is what you said, you're trying to connect those dots between your faith and the principles you learned growing up in the faith to the way you operate your business. Like, what started you down that path of like, hey, I really want to make sure I'm being intentional about the way I lead this business and the way I connect with customers and the way that I do work in the world?
That's a great question. And I don't know if I have a specific answer to it because it wasn't like an aha moment or anything like that. I think it's just been a slow realization. And I think partially from those times where I haven't had very much grace and poise in the way that I've dealt with people in public. You guys have probably seen a lot of the good things, but there have certainly been some lower moments that I've had that I regret where I didn't speak to someone with the love and respect that I think they deserve, despite the way that maybe they were speaking to me. And so I think I've gone through some of those moments, some more defining moments where that happened. And I later, hopefully soon afterwards, was able to look back and be like, that is not my best self. And that's not how I want to treat people in general. And this is actually a time in my life where the way that I treat people directly impacts my career and my business and my passion. And so it's, I guess it is self-serving, but it's also hopefully in the end serving other people better.
Yeah, there's some like
Yeah.
Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Like, is the first primary motivation, hey, I want to be good to people. And then, hey, the ancillary benefit is that they like me or they like my products and they'll buy more stuff. I think that's cool. Like it's the byproduct, maybe not the initial motivation or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's also a risk though, I think, because like, I think, obviously there's benefit to good customer service and that kind of thing. But there's also, a lot of people I think that would tell you like, you can only do so much good customer service before you need to just the goal is just to get more product out there. And obviously by being available to the communities that purchase your games and that kind of thing, like there's always a cost to that, right? Like you're giving time to that could be given to like putting more products out on the market. So all that to say, like, I think I really admire that, like, just in the sense that we talked about a little bit about the capitalistic world that we live in, but I think doing good work and being content, and just doing good work and being good to people, like there's a million pressures out there in the world that tell you like, don't do that because you need to be out there, doing more, making more, doing the next thing. But I think, I think that's not a very, like, for lack of a better word, that's not a very like Christian view of vocation and work.
And it even carries over, in my opinion, beyond customer service to, like, an example is, you guys have seen my games. I try to put a lot of value in that box.
No kidding.
In the game box.
Mm-hmm.
And that stems a lot from me as a gamer. When I open a game, I know the feeling of opening a game and being maybe a little disappointed in what ends up being in the box. And I also know the feeling of opening the box and being overjoyed by how much stuff or how beautiful the things they put in that box. And so it goes back to that idea of treating other people the way that I would hope to be treated through the things that we make, not just the customer service aspects of it.
Well, I think you even going a step further than like components, like it seems to me that it's designed into the mechanics of the games as well. We've talked before about Scythe, and we've heard some of your thoughts on like spite, the idea of spite in games. And I think it's so evident in your games that you try to design against some of that, or try to, I don't know, maybe bring out the best in people as they're playing your games.
Yeah, I love positive player interaction. It's not in all of my games, but I think it's probably the best in Euphoria. But I love when you're competing against other people, but you have good incentives in the game to work together at times. That feels good to me when that happens.
It doesn't feel good in Euphoria when you're the one person that didn't help build that thing. Jared will know exactly what I'm talking about, because we just played Euphoria a couple weeks ago, and there were 4 of us playing. One of the guys went to the bathroom and the 3 of us were like, hey, let's build this thing together. And when he came back, he was screwed. And whatever the penalty was, it was like particularly devastating for him. So it was not good.
Oh, no.
But
yeah. I do enjoy that about that game, though, because anytime you see somebody start to build one of the what do you call them, monuments, or not monuments?
The
markets, the construction site. Yeah,
markets. When you're getting ready to construct a market, it's like, oh nope, I got to get there right now. Like I'm going, it's on. But that's cool. So Jamey, you mentioned about how you're on this path of being more intentional about about applying your faith to the way you do work, but you also mentioned that you're not actively practicing your Catholicism, or however you want to put that. I'd be curious if you might speak to that, like what made you decide, I don't want to be involved with an organized church.
Yeah.
And this is a safe place. Like we just want to hear your perspective. It's not like, why aren't you in church?
We're sending
Sonny?
this to the Pope.
I'm just curious to hear your perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, we have to. It's just
Sure,
it's in the
yeah.
contract.
I signed off on this. Yeah. I mentioned the rituals earlier, and actually, Chris, you mentioned that being a little overwhelmed and confused by the rituals in the Catholic Church, and I think there was a certain point a couple years ago when I really started to feel distant from those rituals, despite knowing what they mean and what they represent, and despite believing in the things that they represent. The rituals themselves started to feel a little weird to me. And weird is a bit of it has judgment behind it. I really don't mean to judge those rituals and people who are still enjoying them. And there's a very good chance that I will return to those rituals someday and embrace them. And when I go, when I go home for Christmas, I will go to church with my family, and those rituals will feel a little bit like home. Like there's the tradition of them, I think, has a good place too. But for me personally, on a Sunday to Sunday basis, they started to feel they weren't connecting with me as they once did.
Like oppressive in a okay.
What were you going to say there?
I was going to ask if they started to feel like somewhat oppressive, like something that you had to do, but wasn't as meaningful for you anymore.
That was part of it. I think like there are lots of chants and songs and things that we repeat in the Catholic Church, and like I just found myself saying them like almost an out of body experience. Like I would be saying these things.
No, I know what
so
you're talking about.
What
yeah.
you're saying there.
I experience that from time to time when it is something that it's a ritual. Like it just becomes. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's that feeling, and maybe people can relate to this if they're not religious and they're listening to this. Have you ever like driven home in a route that you drive every day, and you almost black out because you don't have to like think about it very much. It just
you get home and you're like, how did I get here?
It started to feel like that at church.
No, that's a great way to explain it. And I think that it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, but I do think. I mean, would you say maybe you're in like because you mentioned, more than likely or likely you'll come back to it at some point. Do you kind of feel like you're in a detox right now or something? Like, what's this period like?
Yeah, it could be. It could be. Yeah, there was really only one period in my life where I did not go to church every Sunday, and that was because I was in Japan studying abroad and did not have easy access to it. But from that could definitely be it. Given how long I've done that on a Sunday, how many Sundays have been in my life so far, and so many of them were spent at church.
Yeah. Yeah, we're kind of in a period like that to some degree. Like we're going to a church every Sunday, but we went from being heavily involved in this church, like really heavily, like leading lots of different, like leading a community group. And I would preach and teach actually at this church that we were at fairly often as a layperson, not on staff or anything. And then now we're at this new church that's a lot bigger, and we're kind of, for lack of a better word, like not nearly as visible to the church. And we're not serving in any way, but we plan to eventually, I think. But it's kind of been a good thing. Like, I just think we needed the rest. Like I think we don't. Church has always been a big part of my life, and I always want it to be. I think I definitely want it to be, but it's been good for us to sort of catch our breath. And we have 3 kids. We just had a baby, and I'm started a new nonprofit ministry with Chris and some friends
super easy to do.
A few months ago. And so there's all, so there's all these balls that I'm juggling in life, and sort of realizing I do want to serve in the church, but I need to like sort of recontextualize what that's going to look like for me. And I think so often in life, we don't ever stop and recontextualize those things and think about what's appropriate and what should this look like. A lot of times I think churches do a good job of training us to just like throw yourself in a position, like jump in and serve in this area, and don't really like think about whether or not that's the right fit. And so it's been good for us to kind of like just catch your breath,
I've seen it happen in the world of gaming too. I've seen friends who maybe came to game night every week for a long time, and then they just realized they needed that detox, like you said, Chris. They needed a little bit of a break so that when they come back to it, they feel really rejuvenated and excited about it instead of just going through the motions.
Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think in the church, because it's like because we can always say like, oh, this is God's house or whatever. This is the people of God gathered. So we can put a lot of like unhealthy stress and expectation on one another, where we almost like abusive, like you have to do this because this is the church, and like if you're not doing it, you must be in sin or something. Like if you're not actively serving or doing this, that, or the other. And in reality, like a lot of times it's a lot more complex than that. Like we need to hear each other out. Like I think anyway, I don't know, just this conversation got me thinking about how I think, because I've been involved in actually leading churches, I've been a pastor in the past, like sort of made me think back to those moments where I probably put a lot of undue pressure and didn't love people well because I was like, oh, it's this is the church, you got to get in and serve, and if you're not serving, like what, but in reality it's
so Jamey, have you had any Drews that have shamed you for not being at church?
The priest at the church that I went to, he's been a long time priest there. He's I think he's pretty good at that, about avoiding that. I think he's probably learned the hard way over the years.
Nice. Yeah.
I remember actually I had a formative moment with him where the opposite happened. I accidentally shamed him.
You shamed a priest. Well done.
It was when I was a work.
Now we got to hear this story before we go.
I was a work study student, and I, for some reason, I don't know why I did this, but someone said hi to him. After church, someone came up and said hi, and I was standing there, and it was clear to me that he didn't remember this person's name. And instead of helping him remember this person's name, because he has, he knows thousands of people, I was just a stupid kid, but right in front of this person and in front of him, I said, you don't actually know her name, do you?
Yes.
I don't know what I was thinking, but later on he called me out on it, and I was like, wow, you were totally right. That was completely uncalled for and completely unhelpful. And it definitely put things in perspective for me. We all do stupid things, and hopefully we learn from them. And that was one of them.
That's great.
Yeah. That's funny. It's cool. Well, Jamey, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. We're almost at an hour here, and we got started late, so I want to respect your time. But man, it's been great talking to you. It was
awesome catching with you guys as well. Hopefully the recording worked this time, and we'll get to share this with people.
Yeah. And I do want to mention something before we go. You mentioned that your Stegmaier Games recently published My Little Scythe, and you sent me. You were gracious enough to send me a review copy, but you didn't realize I already owned it when you sent that copy. So I know you guys don't normally do giveaways, but because I already own My Little Scythe and you sent me an extra copy, we want to give away a copy of My Little Scythe. So it's really simple. Just go share this podcast. Share about it on Facebook or Twitter or I don't know, Snapchat. just let us know that you shared it, or you can rate and review our podcast on iTunes or Stitcher, and just send us a note that you did that. So let us know that you did, and we'll enter you into a drawing to win that copy of My Little Scythe, and we'll send it to you, and you'll love it because I love it, and it's awesome. It's fun game in its own right, but it's a fantastic game to play with your kids. So if you have kids, and especially, I think you should consider getting in on that drawing. I play it with my daughter pretty regularly. The first couple times I just tried to teach her the game, but now when we play, she wins pretty regularly. So she's 7, so it's the type of game that what I love about it is that it's a little bit more strategic than your average kids, like game that's kind of made with kids in mind. So it's a great game for teaching your kids a bit of higher level strategy without overwhelming them. So definitely check out My Little Scythe and join that drawing. And go check out everything that we're doing at Love Thy Nerd. Go to lovethynerd.com. We've got a podcast network with Free Play Podcast and our new comic podcast, which is called The Pull List. So go check those out, rate and review those on iTunes. And that's about it for us here.